Well, welcome back. Dr. Mary, we're so thankful that you're taking the time to be with us each week and help us cope with COVID.
Yes, I'm
Your
happy to
advice
be
has
here.
been, oh, thank you. Your advice has been so helpful. Today, we're going to talk about really a hot topic,
Mhm.
family and relationships, right?
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah. What advice do you have for families that are spending perhaps 24 hours together? What are normal signs of dysfunction? Because we've all got them, or signs that maybe we need to be aware of some things that are heading down a bad path.
hmm Well, before we get to the conversation of the dysfunctional, um, let's talk about some of the strategies that we can do to try to get through this time.
Great.
These types of seasons always brings out the best, but it can also bring out the worst.
Yeah.
So this time requires the number one thing I would say is a lot of grace, not just for yourself, but for each other. You're not going to be in your best frame of mind. I myself have been finding myself much more irritable and I have to bite my tongue. It's bleeding. I have to bite my tongue more. And I also have to give grace to the people in my life just because this is not normal that we're always in each other's space. So I think that's really important. I think the second thing is that we actually try as much as possible to create space. So does everybody have their own special location that is just theirs? And if the house is not big enough, if the apartment's not big enough, like put it on a schedule. So, Amy can only be in this room at 3 o'clock. It's her room. But just being really creative about creating space that you can just be on your own and you don't have to be like on or trying, I think is really, really important. And you can get creative, like with kids, take a blanket and make a tent or something and just hide them under there. So that's important. So give yourself emotional space and grace, but also create space. And I think the next thing I would add too, especially if you have kids in the home, is that recognize that kids communicate through behavior. So they don't go up to you, oh, mommy, I'm feeling a little bit distressed today. No, that's not what you get. You're going to get acting out, which of course draws in us a tendency to want to shut it down, makes us irritable, makes us impatient. But studies show that when our kids are dysregulated that way, and we add fuel to the fire by getting angry at them or stern, it actually escalates things. So we want to actually be very, very calm. And we want to actually underreact in some ways and give them lots of empathy. Empathy is the surest way to calm a dysregulated brain. So if you expect that your kids are going to act bad, don't like think, oh no, my child has turned evil. Oh no, I need to get a therapist in to fix my kid. A lot of times it's just trying to cope with the reality of how difficult it is. So make sure that that happens. You don't want to introduce any new behavioral standards like, okay, fine, from now on, every time you do that, I'm going to do this or that. Like just try to keep it
Right.
gracious as much as possible.
Yeah.
And
That's
then
really
and
good. Really good. De-escalate your
de-escalate.
responses.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Lots
And
of
lots of
grace. Good.
empathy, gentleness. And the last thing, which links to the point three, is like intentionally look for opportunities to connect with your kids on an emotional level, whether it's cuddling, whether it's doing a craft together, whether it's laughing together. Kids long for that connection. This is a
Mhm.
perfect time, by the way, to strengthen our attachments to our kids, to our parents.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how often do our kids get our undivided attention in this
Right.
today's world? Like so rarely. So if you have the space now, even if you can give your kid, each child, 30 minutes of your undivided attention, they get to choose what you do and you follow along. Oh
Yeah.
my goodness, that will be incredible. So those
That's
are
a
some tips
yeah.
that I would have.
That's
hmm
great. And they're good parenting tips for, out of isolation time, but really good. What about people who are physically separated from their families right now? Family members are, we can't all obviously isolate together. I haven't seen my grandbabies. Oh, help me, Dr.
hmm
Mary. I'm in
I
withdrawal from seeing
know.
my
I
babies.
know.
Other than video calls, what do you recommend to keep nurturing relationships at a distance?
hmm Well, the things that help is the regular contact for sure, but doesn't always have to be the same way. It could be through letters in the mail, presents that you leave on their doorstep. It could be texts. Maybe you set up game night or movie night where you do fun things together. I think that's all really important. The other thing that's really interesting is during this time, you actually have opportunity for some honest conversations that you might not have if you were being together. So there was a show on Netflix. I won't name it, but the whole scenario was they got to know each other without ever physically seeing each other. And of course, the course of this, they got to be good friends. They fell in love. And so what happens when you're not physically together is you're forced to have to use other means to connect with people. That would be your emotional language and relational skills, and then being able to be more vulnerable with what you share. So I would say during this time, in the conversations that I'm having with some girlfriends, man, we are getting so authentic and so
Right.
honest with each other. And I
Hmm.
honestly feel in many ways I'm closer to them than when I was seeing them in person, just because that level of vulnerability increases. So I
That's
think there are
really
so many
good.
ways that you can build those relationships.
Hmm. So distance
Yeah.
can make the heart grow fonder. Is that true?
Yes. Well, you know what? Back to your question earlier about dysfunction is that distance is a stressor. This season is a stressor, and when there's stress, good things come up, but bad things come up too.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't personally believe that distance creates a problem. I believe that it exacerbates a problem. So maybe you've been denying to yourself, or you're kind of shoving it all under the carpet and things are going okay. But during this time of stress, whether it's distance or being locked up in a home together, things might start to come out to the surface. That tells me it's maybe time to deal with it. Stop white knuckling your way through your family life. If you know you're struggling with marriage issues and this is intensifying it, if you are just barely keeping it together to parent with your kids, this is a time to go and get the help that you need.
Yeah.
This is not a good time to just continue to white knuckle it, because you're going to carry the stress of it, as is your family members,
And I
and
know
create more damage.
yeah, you've emphasized already reaching out for help. And I know that your counseling organization is all online. I'm sure many counselors are online. Is there a direct way they can reach you and your associates?
Yeah, if you go under lifecarecenters.com, all of our
Okay.
therapists are offering online with their phone or video sessions. We do not want
Wonderful.
people to feel alone during this time. So, absolutely, if you're getting to that place of dysfunction, if you can't resolve conflicts, if it's becoming more and more negative in the home rather than
Mhm.
positive, all of those are signs of possible dysfunction that
Yeah.
we need to be addressing. And then, of course, the worst case scenario where the conflicts are getting to the point where there could be even physical or emotional violence.
Right.
Now actually is a time that people who are vulnerable, that would be our women and our children, can be even more
Right.
vulnerable to abuse
Yes.
because of these difficult circumstances we find
Yes.
ourselves in. Hmm.
Well, we'll talk about that maybe in the next segment together, but I think that's very good. And that's something I've been praying a lot about. And as you said, I think this also reveals something about our relationship with God, too.
Yes.
So I've found that it's time for me to draw closer to the Lord and to lean into my relationship with Him. And I would encourage every viewer to do that and let the Lord work out some of the hurts and hangups in your heart that maybe you haven't processed in the time outside of this isolation period. Thank you, Dr. Mary. We're so thankful for you and for your insight. I'm encouraging people to find your resources on 700club.ca, a free downloadable anxiety workbook, as well your Fully Lived Life podcast. It's wonderful. We'll talk to you again next week.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, we'll be right back.